Thank you for being here. Welcome to Organizing a Resident-Owned Community. My name is Sam Carlson. I'm a technical assistance manager at the Manufactured Housing Cooperative Development Center, CASA of Oregon, and I'll be our moderator today. What we're going to do first is kind of introduce each of our panelists. I'll pass the mic, and we can each introduce ourselves, and then we can get into the content for today. So I'll go ahead and pass it to Joe.
Hi, my name is Joe Manning. I live at Filbert Grove Cooperative, which is a 55-plus park. We have a binder that we can pass around. I hope that it gets back to us. But you can be looking at that while we're talking to you. What else do I need to say here? We're just going to keep it going. All right.
Hi, my name is Susan Stoltenborg. I'm also at the Filbert Grove 55-plus community, and I'm the current vice president. And yeah, it's been exciting.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rose Ojeda, and I'm the director of CASA's Manufactured Housing and Cooperative Development Center.
Okay, so to get started, we're going to go through a narrative timeline of kind of the process that Filbert Grove went through to kind of transition from an investor-owned community to a resident-owned community. So we're going to start at the period right around March 2019, when residents of what was then called the Patrician received proposal of rezoning from the then owner. So I'll go ahead and give it to Joe to kind of talk a little bit about that period.
I'm not really sure how the slides work into this. Okay. Yeah, we used to live in the Patrician. That's the Patrician sign. It was owned by a developer, investor, and we were all living happily ever after pretty much, you know, as old folks and, you know, doing our thing with our gardens and so forth. And then we got a notice that the owner-developer corporation was going to City Hall. He had filed to change the park from residential to mixed-use commercial. And we understood what that meant, some of us. And so we rallied and got some people out of their, you know, their recliners and so forth and out of their houses to go to City Hall and tell everyone they knew. I mean, go to the grocery store, tell people, go to church, tell people, you know, invite your whole family. I mean, get there. We have to stop this. So we got extensions. I don't know how far. Should I pass it to?
Oh, wait, yeah, we can talk a
Oh,
little.
okay. So, yeah, this is basically, I made flyers because I have experience doing some stuff like that, and, you know, just to put on the mailboxes and put on we use clothespins in the garage. It's a carport, yeah. You know,
Put the word out.
knock on the door and so forth and so on. You know, to show up and speak, we sent letters so much. It's all kind of a blur now, but it was so much work. And there we are. We got on the news a lot.
I think that was KEZI who's covering.
Yeah, KEZI, we got in the Oregonian. You'll see that later, but
Packed courthouse.
yeah, standing room only. All the advocacy agencies within the Springfield and Eugene area were coming out to speak on our behalf, and, you know, to just let the city council, actually the planning commission at that point, know that this is not working. You can't take 80 homes from people, plow it down, you know, give them $6,000 to $8,000 for their homes that cost a lot more than that, and put them out on the street or send them to their relatives who don't really want them most of the time. What do we have? Yeah, so we went through, you know, we lost. We won the planning commission. We lost city council, even though usually the city council will take the recommendation of the planning commission. They didn't do that. I could talk a lot about that, but I won't. But anyway, so then, you know, basically COVID hit. We had fires in the area. We were all putting our homes up for sale or trying to, but then realizing we couldn't. There would not be anywhere to live. It was so scary. I'm laughing because I'm nervous, but it was something else. Okay, so then I contacted a lawyer who was an advocate who had helped us before, and she told me and us, the people that were on, the team. One of them is no longer with us. She was one of the late 70s year old women, Joelle, and she offered her home for all of us to meet in. Anyway, I'm going to pass it on to Susan and Rose to tell the next part.
Well, it was all part of the organizing thing. So, as Joe mentioned, getting the word out there, relatives, where I was working full time. Families would come in to give testimony, and church, a pastor had come in from one of my co-workers' church, and it was just getting the word out there. You have to be a cheerleader, it's like, you really need to do this, or here's your choices. If we don't become a resident-owned community, it will either be bought out by a large corporation who will increase rents to the max, where it would not be affordable for any of us anymore. Right, the max allowable. And as we know, last year it was 14.26 or 25. I mean, that would price out, at least most of the people. So that would make people move. There were some cases where they truly would be homeless. They had no place to go. And so if we don't do this, I just bought my home. This is my first home ever. And all I could visualize was turning my back while they bulldoze my home, and I'm paying a mortgage for something that doesn't exist anymore. So it was like all these were motivations, and getting that word out there through potlucks. One of the biggest challenges was COVID. That was, people weren't familiar with Zoom, so now not only do we have to convince them to come, we have to convince them to do this on Zoom. And since we're seniors, a lot of those seniors didn't even have the communication skills to connect.
Yeah, they didn't have computers even.
No, some of them, nor smartphones.
Right.
So it was a real challenge reaching out to everyone. And so that was part of, again, one of the many challenges. But we continued, and then that led up to the city council meetings, and they did pass it. So that was very sad. Yeah. Rose? This is where CASA was wonderful. The TAs, I know there's more TAs here. Yay.
So in Oregon, we have an opportunity to purchase law, and when an owner of a manufactured dwelling park is going to sell their property, they do have to notify the residents that the park is for sale. Now, it's my understanding that this particular owner had rezoned the property because they wanted to build a hotel on the property. So, I'm going to say it. The owner of the park and the city council were comfortable displacing 82 households for a luxury hotel. Now, I want everybody to have that sink in, because that was the reality that the residents were dealing with.
120 people.
And and this can happen in any community. I think, though, since that time, and because of our affordable housing crisis, we have a much more growing awareness among all of our public entities about the need to preserve existing housing and build more new homes. But this is still happening across the country, and it is why we, as an organization, got involved with our national partner, Rock USA. They're based out of New Hampshire, to implement this particular program. And then keep in mind, too, that we started doing this program because in the early 2000s, they did close down a significant number of parks in Oregon for pretty much from the late 90s, as the real estate market was really taking off, through the mid 2000s. Started finally to slow down in 2007, and then that's when we jumped on board. But they did just give residents notice that they were closing the parks. Thousands lost their homes. They received very little in compensation. And not only did they get displaced during that time, but some properties that were where the residents were displaced from their manufactured home sat fallow for years during the recession. And so that's 5-6 years where land just sat fallow after the residents were displaced from their manufactured dwelling park. So it was a real crisis, and so we really felt like we needed to be involved and and help figure out how to solve this problem and preserve manufactured dwelling parks for predominantly lower income families.
I'm smiling because of all the positivity and moving forward, and there's always a handful of naysayers, and boy, can they make that miserable for you. So you always have to be prepared for the full spectrum. It was, but we overcame them as well. So let's get this back to Sam.
Sure. I have one too over here. So could you two tell us a little bit about how you initially got connected with CASA and kind of what that initial organizing period was like for you two and for the rest of the residents?
I'm actually trying to remember because, I do. When we learned that the developer was going to try to get rezoning, I went to legal aid, and I spoke with Judith Moman, and she helped with the fight, and she had resources, and she knew other people. One of them was another lawyer who could not represent us, but was a fantastic advocate, and she had a lot of resources. So all of those pooled together. Lori knew about CASA. Lori Hauber knew about CASA and ROC and all of that. I'd never heard about any of it. I was just like, oh, there's hope.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
We're having problems with advancing the slide, so should we just tell you next?
Oh, okay, so then getting exposure. So people would contact the TV. It made the Oregonian Register Guard. So this was like gaining momentum. And I think that was one of the surprise factors. I don't think the owner was ready to see that we were pushing back. We were just not going to walk away. And that kind of kept him on his toes too. And so it was, that was another piece that made us move forward.
So what did you two think of the resident-owned community model? Like when you first heard of it and kind of were thinking about it in relation to your homes in your community, kind of what was your first thought? How did you react to it?
Honestly, I was kind of terrified for months and in a reactive mode, but I trusted the people who had helped us, fighting, to try to keep the park as resident-owned. And then when he put it up for sale, I was like, oh my gosh. And he had offers already. I mean, very large offers. And so, yeah, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified and in reactive mode.
Well, it was scary too, but that's also a motivator too. And you said a big word, trust, because we trusted all these guys who were helping organize and assuring us that, the funding, if we could get the funding. I mean, that's a lot of money. It's like, where does this come from? It was very confusing. So you just kind of keep moving and moving forward.
I lost a friend over it. She told me I was making a deal with the devil. That's a quote. Yeah, and other people in the park fought it. I'm like, okay, we're still going to do it. We trust these guys.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so what we try to do when we purchase these parks on behalf of the residents is CASA, first negotiates with the owner of the park. And this particular owner was very focused on the bottom line. He really didn't have any regard for the residents. It just wasn't in his thinking. He was going to try to make the most money he possibly could. He already had 3 other offers. We came in, we basically met the offer, and then but it took a lot of persuading for him to really take the offer seriously. And in the end, he said, "Okay, I'll do it." And I really had to plead to his goodwill and to consider the offer. And then he said, "Okay, I'll do it, but I want you to pay $50,000 more than everybody else." So we're just like, "Okay, fine, we'll do it." And then we ended up finding $50,000 from the county commissioner, Joe Burney, helped us negotiate that with Homes for Good in Lane County, and they pretty much just said, "Okay, we'll guarantee the $50,000 if things go south on this." So it really did take a lot of partners coming together to make this happen, to preserve this particular community. But sometimes you really are up against folks who just they're just not thinking about the impact that decision is going to, that business decision is going to make, not only on the immediate residents, but also the community. I mean, you're about to create you're going to add to our homelessness problem, with seniors. I mean, it's pretty daunting just to understand that sometimes that just doesn't always factor in for some folks. And so we really do have to convince them and persuade them to do the right thing. And this particular owner, ultimately decided, okay, I'll take this offer seriously, but I want it closed within 90 days, which is just unheard of. And our lender is out here in the audience, Rachel with Network for Oregon Affordable Housing. And I'm just like, "Rachel, can we do this?" And she says, "Well, we'll give it our best shot." And we did factor in an additional extension in case we needed it. But this particular seller was just absolutely said, "If you're going to do this, you got to do it on my terms, and I want it done fast." So we had to do a bridge loan in order to just acquire the property, and then later we converted it to a permanent loan.
Honestly, I think that one of the reasons that he may have given in, of course, Rose is a force to be reckoned with, but also, all of us showing up over and over and over again, over and over and over and over and over and over. This was not doing his reputation any good, So if he turned us down, I think he pretty much knew we were going to the press again, and we had them on speed dial. So, we were lucky that way. Do you have another question?
Yeah. So, Susan,
Well, just that there was no place to go is the bottom line. Since everybody there pretty much needed affordable housing, there were lists of people waiting for affordable housing. So it's not like we could even go from something reasonable to another reasonable area. There was nothing.
So no worries. So in the period between so after you got connected with CASA and when the organizing process had started and the board training, what was that like for you two? For both of you served on the board, so what was that like?
Exhausting. There were a million meetings. We had the 2 board meetings per month and the steering committee before that. For each board meeting, there's an agenda meeting. Each board meeting lasted about 2 hours or so. The agenda meetings were approximately 1 hour each. And then there was the training in between. And then organizing more and more and more ballots. We have to get ballots out to people to elect an interim board. And so that was another process of making sure that everybody got it, especially because we had those naysayers. We had to make sure that everybody received the ballot. They had to sign for their ballot. So full transparency.
Okay, so we have a small park and we have gardens. And basically, I joke that I can't go outside without getting into a conversation with someone, right? So how it was going back then was, if you come over and start talking to me, you're going to end up on the board. You're going to be volunteering to put up flyers. So people didn't want to really talk to me that much, and that's the truth. But yeah, it was really hard to get volunteers at first. We have Peggy is going to be 90, and Peggy Lady is her name. She's going to be 90 in December. And you know, I texted her. She can't talk on the phone. She has a hearing aid, doesn't work all the time, and she can't really leave her house that much. She's on oxygen, but she's like, I want to stay in my home. You know, I'll be on the steering committee. We had a steering committee, and so she was on the original one. And people really showed their true colors during this. We learned a lot about our neighbors.
So I'll just add that CASA brings to this effort a organizer. So in this case, we had Sean First, who is a contract organizer that we brought on board because we were going to have to expedite this process. We wanted to bring in someone who was just like ready to go and could accomplish this task with us. So she came in and she met with the residents regularly. And then Sean and I met separately and to keep her up to date on how things were going on my end. And that involved doing all the due diligence, the negotiating the contract, monitoring the project, turning in all of our paperwork. Because this is a professional real estate transaction, we have to have all the paperwork reviewed by a real estate brokerage firm. So we had to turn all that in, maintain all that. So there was just a lot of things going on behind the scenes while the residents got organized and educated with the organizer.
And another factor in all of this as well was this happened COVID and fire season up the Mackenzie, which is a stone's throw from where we live. So there was a lot of competition for the funds out there. So Rose was out there fighting.
I tried not to call Rose. I tried to go through Sean and so forth, but Rose talked me off the ledge a few times. Yeah. I would call her up and she'd go, Joe, I've got 5 minutes, because she'd have to go and do something else. I know, it's like, okay, talk fast.
Okay, so when the co-op had been formed and your offer to purchase the park had been accepted, what was that like? What was the feeling, among the residents?
Can you fast forward to a couple of
Slides.
yeah? Can you move the slide? Move forward. That's our first resident organizing meeting.
And we had to meet outside because on our property there's a clubhouse, but it was still owned by the Patrician. So we originally could not gather there. So fortunately, we didn't have rain and we did gather outside.
Next slide.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, for sure. So after the co-op had been formed and your offer to purchase the park had been accepted, what was the feeling? What was the feeling among the residents, after your journey getting there?
We were really happy, very grateful, and again scared because then we had been told the whole time, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And basically, we were learning in a very short amount of time how to run a multi-million-dollar corporation, and not really something that we knew how to do.
I mean, I can balance my checkbook, but and plus, obviously, getting volunteers. It's amazing. They're seniors and they have a lot of knowledge, though, too. So some of them had these niches that were just, I have to give credit to Phil. He's one of our ops guys, operations, and he just knows everything about the park, infrastructure, and so he oversaw and continues to oversee all the improvements that have been needed to make. I think Noah specified this, and this need to be done, bring things up to code, et cetera, and so he had it. He understood it. He communicated so well with volunteers because we constantly volunteers. This is how we work for folks, and we're not picking up dog poo. We're not emptying it anymore. This is on you.
So when A resident, yeah, the slide is not working, so if you could move it forward. These are just some additional photos of folks coming together for, the voting, essentially. Go ahead, next slide. And then this is actually the day when Joe and Bud, the president and, was it vice president at the time?
Bud was president
Okay.
and Joe was vice president.
These were the founding board members. They showed up for the signing table to sign all the closing documents. And by then, Rock USA always gifts this We Own It banner to all of the co-ops once they are ready to close. And so we got a little early, so we thought, hey, let's just put it up and have it there for picture purposes for when they sign. But before they actually begin operations, we do put in place, well, first of all, we have a technical assistance contract with the co-op. So we're providing technical assistance post-purchase for pretty much the life of the loan, and the loan's for 20 years. If they decide they want to change their technical advisor, they can after 10 years. But so far, we generally stay on as advisors. And then we also they're required to have a professional property management firm as well that helps. And we have 3 right now that are experienced property management firms that are familiar with homeowner associations and now cooperatives. So they're on board. And then we connect them also with a nonprofit legal service through the Lewis and Clark College Small Business Legal Clinic. And so they have all those professionals involved in assisting them throughout this process. Mm-hmm. And then as Susan explained, we have retirees who come from various walks of life, including some with some really helpful professional careers, that accountants, bookkeepers, property management companies, construction professions, and so forth. So it can bring those services or their experience to the role of the co-op board. That's next slide. Okay.
Oh, this was a fun time. This was taking down the Patrician and then putting up our own banner. We couldn't wait to get that down. And so there's the person on the left is Phil Renshaw, the ops guy. That's me. Bernie was one of our secretaries. And then the guy at the end there is Joe's husband.
Next slide.
And yes, we did imbibe.
The next slide.
Yeah. Elation, that's a good word. Elation. Everybody was just like thrilled to death. Residents would come up to us and say, "Oh, thank you. You're doing a great job." That doesn't mean that they're going to help, but you're doing a good job. So it's good to hear that.
Well, and those pictures are a good prompt for this question, which is, how has being part of the co-op affected your relationship with your neighbors?
Do you want to go first? I have to be true. I was working full time. I served on another board, and then during H&R Block tax season, I worked at the front desk. So I didn't know my neighbors. So this did allow me a chance to get to know some of my neighbors and connect with them. And there's just like a lot of wonderful people there, and kind-hearted, willing to help each other. One of the residents kind of whacked down some of the stuff in my backyard for me, and so it's helping each other. We truly take care of each other and help each other. So that is a big plus.
Okay, I'm going to say realistically, not everyone was on board at the beginning, and now some of them are literally on the board. Yeah, which is odd. I had just about every person in the park on my phone in my contact list because I needed to know who was calling me and whether I wanted to pick up or not. But I got all kinds of questions because, I was one of the original people that helped get this rolling. And people were calling me crying and telling me their whole life story and They were so scared, you know, and how's it going to work out? Sorry, just remembering it. But it did. You just have to put one foot in front of the other and keep going.
Next slide.
Oh, the celebration.
Celebration.
Guess who that is? And that's Sean, our first TA, who helped get us through that. And so we did kind of pop the bubbly for a celebration. And we had a fair amount of residents turn out. So that was awesome.
The next slide is good.
Next slide.
Oh.
Some more celebrants.
Well, this is actually ballot counting. So because of the transparency thing, the board members who are running can't vote, and residents can, and we needed to get some outside counters, people who were not associated. So some of my outside friends are in there, and some of the other people, Erica and Pat, Bernie's in there, Joe, myself, Deanna Critch, who is a resident, and the interim board's first president's wife, and then my friend Diana.
Next slide. There's a few photos of the celebration.
The celebration.
I did want to mention one more thing. I'm not sure if it goes along with the next slide. But the newsletters that some of you are looking at, the reason those were necessary was because communication is necessary, and especially when you're in a park or a neighborhood that has a lot of older people that don't have computers and so forth and so on. It was important that we let them know everything that was going on, and it cut down the phone calls to me. But yeah, it's really good to let everyone know. It helps them to feel like they're a part of what is going on, that you're not just doing it whatever you want. You know, we asked a lot of questions. We had potlucks when we could. You know, we tried to get them involved. Let's get together and help somebody do some yard work, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah, can you move on to the next slide? This is still not working for us.
Oh, yeah.
This is the best. The cake, obviously, it just speaks for itself. We zone this, we own it.
Yeah, Sean first.
Sean first bought this from Portland. She was in the Portland area. Brought that down. Homemade. It was made locally. Let's put it that way.
And next slide. I think we have the end here.
I think we're coming. Yeah. Maybe.
Next slide.
I think this is one of the last ones.
No, okay.
No, there it is.
Yeah. So for you two, what were some of the most rewarding moments throughout this process and some of the most challenging moments?
Moments?
Yeah.
Key, you know, most rewarding and most challenging takeaways. for each of you.
Stability. I own my home, and I feel confident that a landlord is not going to rip it out from underneath me, the land underneath me. And I'm also happy to report that we did not have a rent increase this year.
I think I got more faith in humanity. You know, I was just trying to be retired and do my own thing, and people just came out of the woodwork to help us. I'm going to make myself cry again. I am so grateful and so proud of all the people who helped us. And I was just so surprised, you know.
And government people too. So it's like like you mentioned Bernie, and a lot of county commissioners and
Your state legislator.
Mm-hmm.
yes, and yeah. We have, the campaign for writing letters to all the representatives. We sent out lists with addresses and names and emails. So that was all part of the organizational part of contacting and, you know, getting that word out there and to let it be known. And I actually donated blood. They had a blood mobile where I worked, and then I went to a town meeting where Peter DeFazio was. I never did anything like that in my life, and when they were passing that microphone, I I said, yep, I got something to tell you. So just anything you can do, public bulletin boards with the flyers and everything. So all that's part of communicating.
Is your rep Lively?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to also give a shout out to Rep Lively. He came through with $500,000 for the project as well as part of their permanent financing. So that was a legislative ask on behalf of the Philbrook Grove Cooperative.
One of them, I forget, I'm sorry, I should remember, but sent a letter to the developer, saying you don't want to get this rezoned, you don't want to kick these people out.
Yeah, there was definitely some pressure on the seller locally to again do the right thing, but it still took real convincing when it got to the point where we were going to negotiate, on the purchase of the park, because I don't think he really thought we could do it, and he didn't think the residents could do it. And that is a really common response that I get from the sellers, and I'm sadly even sometimes some of our colleagues in the industry, they don't think residents can do this for themselves. And we're here to tell you they step up and they can do it and they can achieve this on their own. So we would like to see more resident-owned communities taking control of their multifamily housing, including apartment complexes that we are all involved in developing. So we are kind of moving in that direction, and we have one new construction development in Southern Oregon that we hope to convert to a resident-owned community. It will be our first multifamily development. But again, I think you really need to train, educate, organize residents to really achieve full control of their housing. And the other wonderful thing that happens is they're also controlling their housing costs. Mm-hmm. They're in charge of the rent approvals and their operating budgets, and as such, they become excellent stewards of managing their operating costs because they know that this directly impacts their rents, their monthly space rents. So we're finding just, with a few exceptions, most of them are doing exceptionally well at managing their co-op.
I don't think it's really a matter of asking residents, would you like to volunteer, to be on a committee or something? It's, you're going to lose your homes. You better step up or you're going to be on the street or something that you would, prefer not to be doing.
Yeah. Thank you so much to both of you for sharing your experiences. It means a lot. We want to open it up at this time to folks in the audience who have any questions for our panelists. I can step out here. And if anyone has a question, please raise your hand and I'll come deliver you the microphone. Yeah.
Testing.
Have you guys seen any new legislative changes made in order to help give these kinds of situations more rights to the people in the parks, as opposed to just a corporate guy coming in and saying we're selling? Is there some sort of legislative piece that says you have to give opportunity or priority to residents first?
No,
to purchase?
A right of first refusal law, we have been advised, is very unlikely to pass in Oregon at this point. And so what we have instead is the opportunity to purchase law that gives residents at least an opportunity to compete. And of course, we continue to advocate for funding. We need a lot of loan capital in order to make these, acquisitions, successful. And then grant funding also to help subsidize some of those costs to acquire a property. So we're constantly advocating for, more funding, definitely. And then on the opportunity to purchase side, in 2021, we did get an amendment to the opportunity to purchase law to give residents more time once they had received the financial information that's required of the sellers by statute. Before, I believe they had to respond really quickly. It was like 15 days, I think. And so now they have up to 45 days. So, we're constantly amending the laws as needed, based on how things are actually working in the field. But opportunity to purchase is a very important law. and keep in mind too that even with opportunity to purchase or have right of first refusal, we can't move forward with a park purchase unless we have the loan capital. So the loan capital is extremely important to make this program successful. And even though we might get several notices of intent to sell in a year, I'm estimating in the range of maybe 12 a year, that we are only successful in moving forward 2 to 3 parks per year because either a lack of capital or the residents just aren't ready, or frankly, the seller violates the opportunity to purchase loan. We don't ever hear about it. So that does happen once in a while. So, but we continue to, CASA does continue to work on, advocacy efforts to change laws as needed. And then we do periodically invite our residents to help us with that advocacy work.
Thanks. I'm Rachel from Network for Oregon Affordable Housing. I just wanted to add, if that's okay, Rose, that loan capital is a really limiting factor because the purchase price for these communities is extremely high and sometimes in the tens of millions of dollars. And so as a not-for-profit lender, we don't have an unlimited pool of funds that we can provide. And so unfortunately, there are a lot of communities that end up not getting funded because, limited capital and limited availability from government funds as well. Also wanted to mention that there is a tax incentive for the seller if they do, allow the purchase by the resident-owned community. But I did have a question as well. I was wondering, you talked about trust. I think a lot of times what I hear is that the structure of purchasing by a resident-owned community seems too good to be true. And I can see that even from the lender's perspective. If somebody came to me and said, you can, after all this time, you can own your home and, it seems like there's no strings attached. Like, why would that be happening, right? So how do you get the naysayers eventually on board and build that trust? Because it's a real challenge. And in addition, Rose, I was going to ask you how you get the seller to get there too in terms of trust.
I say, my opinion, but what we did is we just kept going. We realized that we didn't have those people. We weren't going to try to convince them. We were just going to keep going and get it done.
There were mixed reasons why they didn't want to come on board, and the worst one was that he wanted to be king of the hill. He wanted to run the show himself. He didn't want to share.
So in terms of building trust with the residents and with the sellers, they're both going to be challenging at the beginning, very early in the process. For the residents, we really have to just demonstrate our track record. And we, as of the end of this year, we hope to have 26 parks converted into resident-owned communities. And again, we keep adding 2 to 3 parks a year. So, our expertise grows. Our ability to actually accomplish the transactions once they start becomes a consideration certainly for the sellers. Can you actually accomplish this? And then how are you going to get all the residents, organized in such a short period of time? So I do have to really explain to them how this process works, explain to them that we have the expertise to do that, and we have all the partners, NOAA, the state of Oregon, and and we can achieve this. If everybody can come together. For the residents, it is about having an effective organizer who can help build that, that bridge of trust. There are always going to be a minority of naysayers among the residents. Some of them just do not trust that this is really going to work, and so they kind of set themselves up for failure at the beginning, thinking this isn't going to work, so they don't have to be disappointed frankly, I'm sorry, I'm going to get a little psycho on everybody or psychoanalytical on everybody, but I think I've seen this enough that I know that sometimes they just don't think this is really going to happen. And so it just takes that process, and each step is a success. We can get to the next success and the next success and the next success, and then ultimately at the end they see, okay, wow, this is really achievable. We can really make this happen. And it's interesting too, because I think the sellers are all the way through are kind of on the same track as the residents. We just keep moving this forward. And I sort of refer to the naysayers as kind of the noise. There's always going to be that noise, that you're going to need to sort of, address and manage. But then you just have your task. You have your task and you stay on task. And keep moving this forward. Sort of deal with the naysayers and the noise, but keep this moving forward. And eventually, the noise quiets down and the naysayers join. Or they leave. They actually sometimes, they may be really philosophically opposed to this model, and so they just leave the park and decide this is not for them, this isn't going to work for them, so they're gone. And that does happen.
And truthfully, there were about 130 people out of the 81 families units. And of that, truthfully, there were only like a handful. But like I said, there was just one to make enough noise that made it most unpleasant. So, gone.
Rose, in my opinion, is not a salesperson. She didn't come at us like, do you want to buy a car? She made a lot of sense, and I liked that. So I trusted her.
Thank you. First of all, congratulations on owning your stuff. So excited. Anyway, I like the tenant-owned buildings, but do you guys do like row houses as well, that type of thing? Because I know previously I had rented from someone who owned one of those, and they rented it, but then they decided to sell. And they had a management company, and they're like, oh yeah, they're selling it a couple times. And so does your service, does CASA offer any help with that? Like, for example, just like I lived in a duplex and my side was sold, of course. Yeah. So just wondering.
Not yet. In order to really make these feasible, we'd have to do, it'd have to be several, units of housing in order to, make this financially feasible for all the residents and, to get the loans and grants that we would need to secure this. So, but that's sort of the next phase for us, is to look into multifamily, the more traditional multifamily cooperative development.
I'm going to go back to when you guys mentioned that you did get an attorney or you consulted with an attorney. What was the key roles and what suggestions that they had for you guys and how impactful they were?
Well, again, they couldn't advise us, but they could give us guidance, because we couldn't hire them. But they could point you in the right direction to resources, of which CASA was one of them, right? And what else, Joe?
Judith Moman was the first person that I spoke with, and it's in the binder, which I don't have right now, but she said something that we printed on a brochure that we handed out to everyone. Oh my gosh, and I'm not going to remember it, but basically, I'm not going to remember it. She did give advice though, and I wrote it down, and she did.
Setting specific requirements from the landlord, right. And then the goals from that. That's what it was. Expectations.
Yeah, basically, don't kick us out onto the street.
So now, can CASA help other manufactured home parks maybe approach the owner to sell because they're not taking care of the property, or things are becoming dilapidated, and the residents are, basically they're losing their asset because, as well as everything else. So is that something that CASA can help approached
Yes,
to
we do.
fix?
We do get approached, periodically to come and evaluate a park that is, struggling, or there are violations. And so, the first thing we really have to do is talk to the residents just to sort of see if they want to, consider this. They tend to be less successful, when we're, taking that approach, because, the seller has to agree to sell, and they just may not be ready, and and sometimes for small parks, the owners are really struggling too to try to maintain their parks, and they're privately developed and owned, and so they don't have necessarily all the resources that as nonprofits we can get for the residents. And so we do explain that to sellers, but even with that, they still may be reluctant to sell. So in our experience, that takes a lot of effort, and sometimes you just have to wait till they're ready. But we can always do that as well and see if the timing works out for everyone. But more often than not, it's probably the sellers who are reluctant to move forward just at that moment. They're going to need more time. And the residents too. There are times when residents just say, we can't take this on. We're not ready for this right now, and so we have to pass. And then also, as Rachel was mentioning, some parks, the price points for parks is increasing dramatically in the last 4 or 5 years, and so that's become a real struggle too. We might have the residents who are interested in taking this on. The sellers are really motivated to try to sell to the residents, but we don't have the loan capital for some of these larger, higher priced parks. So that's a real challenge as well.
Congratulations again. What type of financial responsibility do the homeowners have now regarding the purchase or upkeep?
I mean, in terms of like rent space?
Just, in general. Do you pay a portion of the loan, or you just did your space fee, or did that change since ownership from the previous person?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, so they did borrow money to purchase their parks, and we also were able to get some grants for them. So that helped at least reduce the debt on the purchase of the park. But they still were faced with a rent increase of about $100 in total, I think we phased it in, $50 in the first year and $50 in the second year. So it was a $100 rent increase, and we are seeing that more and more. Because just the price points. They're so much higher now for manufactured dwelling parks. Pretty much all real estate, but manufactured dwelling parks have really exponentially really taken off. And so they have lot rents, and those lot rents create the revenue to cover both their debt and their operating expenses. So we do take them through an underwriting process, and NOAA, chiefly controls that. And then, we make sure, and they make sure that they also have reserves set aside to make sure that they always stay sustainable. And I believe that Filbert Grove Cooperative right now is achieving really great sustainability and has really good reserves and has really positive cash flow.
I think it was originally, the rent would go up $50 for over 3 years.
But we skipped this year.
Yeah.
Because we did a good job. And the other thing that I wanted to mention about the rent increase is that if it were charged the maximum amount, it was still like half of what would have been increased. So my rent, instead of going up $110, went up $50. So talk about a win-win.
Another reason is because we had most of the people in the park owned their double wides or single wides, mostly double wides, but we also had some rentals that people, they didn't own. So it was suggested that we try to sell those, and eventually I think we only have two left, so that money helps too.
Yeah. And this particular park also had a single-family home, And so they're renting that out for, a pretty decent rent now. But even then, it's all the rents are staying pretty much below market now. And in Lane County, Marion County, some of the Southern Oregon coast, Washington County, we are seeing space rents approaching over $1,000 per month now. So it's just, and then once you have those levels, then everybody's going to attempt to reach those levels. So, and they're well below $1,000 at Philbrook Grove for their space rent.
And just as a little side note also, on the rents that we could have increased up to max, we did not. So the 2 rentals and the single family home, they did not get that 14% interest. No, that not cool.
I have 2 semi-related questions. And for the first one, sorry if you already said this, are you an LLC or are you guys a nonprofit technically? Cool, thanks. And then what's the onboard and exit process for residents when they want to move in or out? What does that look like?
That pretty much goes through the property management and has that 30-day intent to sale kind of thing. And then the property management processes all the paperwork, the background checks, etc. And so then that also removes us from any bias too. So this is done through a party that's not on our property.
Okay, so now do you guys also accept head vouchers or any of that? Can your folks apply for those kinds of resources? And then also, do you have a resident service program or anything like that that's accompanied with your park?
What kind of resident service?
So it's a resident. It's usually the affordable contracts and stuff have a required resident service component. So somebody who's hired on staff to help make sure that the residents receive resources and different things like that.
Yeah, so this is a hybrid of rental and home ownership. So with the very heavy lean into home ownership. So the way resident services works for cooperatives is that the board really acts much more like an information and referral resource for the homeowners. So we just connect them with resources in Lane County and the city of Springfield, and then they know they can refer homeowners to those resources. And then also on site, they have started a food pantry, so that's kind of part of the efforts to make sure that residents get those resources. And then as CASA gets information about resources that are available to homeowners, we share those resources with the co-ops as well. And yes, this is treated just pretty much like any other manufactured dwelling park, except that it's resident owned. And so yes, they can accept Section 8 vouchers for the lot rent.
It has taken a little while for the residents who were used to having a property management company. It took them a little while to get used to the fact that they're owners. They own the park now. So, and that's still ongoing. It's like, okay, you can call us, but we're not going to run over there and change your light bulb. You know what I mean? It's your light bulb.
I have a question. First of all, congratulations on owning your homes too. That's amazing. I think a lot of us want to be in the space where we're able to obtain home ownership, and I think this model is actually a pretty great model that I wish had more momentum than not, for all the reasons that you all have been describing, from preservation, stability, home ownership, access, and wealth building. Rose, I have a question for you. So CASA is one organization. Are there other organizations that also support this co-op resident-owned model in the state of Oregon? And I say that because as someone else in the audience, raised their hand for the opportunity for this model, but probably in different housing types. I do see an opportunity, especially with land use laws changing to allow middle housing types. So what comes to mind is cottage clusters. So I think there's an opportunity, but how much capacity in the state of Oregon do we have for this, for a proactive and then also preservation perspective?
Well, I think this is an area that a lot of people are really interested in, including other nonprofit organizations. But we do have certainly CASA of Oregon and Square One Villages in Eugene area. They're developing, tiny homes, cottage clusters, other kinds of multifamily developments, and turning them into co-ops. And also, they have the land trust model. Land trust is similar to cooperatives, except that obviously the co-ops are very much in that hybrid. The residents are own the land and the infrastructure, and then they separately own their own improvement. There is a private individual also who assists residents of manufactured dwelling parks form cooperatives. I think they just sort of help them get the financing to purchase, but in that model the residents have to come up with a 25% down payment, because most commercial loans only lend 75, a loan to value of 75%. So that means residents have to generally come up with tens of thousands of dollars each in order to buy their park under that, private developer or consultants model. And then again, it's just strictly the acquisition, and then they are on their own. In our model, the joining fee is $5, and then the membership fee there was it? It was $50. So it costs them $50 to become a member of their co-op.
One time, yep.
I think we're coming to the end of our time. We'll take a few more questions.
This is more of a fun question. This entire process, what type of money are we talking for the final purchase or final financing?
You just want to talk money now? Okay. Let's do it. Well, first of all, I do want to recognize Oregon Housing Community Services staff who are in the back. I see you, Ed. You can't hide. And I'm sorry. Who? Martin. Sorry, I haven't seen you on Zoom calls for a while. Martin and Ed Brown with Oregon Housing Community Services. So they provide the GAP grant that we use to, and they do have a program utilizing both Oregon Affordable Housing Tax Credits and GAP funds to help preserve manufactured dwelling parks. The last biennium was probably the largest amount of funding that we ever received for this particular program, and it really helped us preserve a significant number of manufactured dwelling parks in Oregon. And then, of course, we have Network for Oregon Affordable Housing, who was the lender on this deal. And let's see, I think CASA came in just for the bridge financing to purchase the park. The initial purchase price was $11 million. And then with the multiple offers, it quickly jumped up to $12 million. And then by the time we were done, we were at $12,050,000 for 82 spaces, which at the time was really kind of unheard of. I mean, this was just incredible price point. But now that's not unusual at all. We're seeing these, $13 to $16 million price points for parks of about the same size. So you can see what's happening here. We're experiencing some really dramatic price increases for these manufactured dwelling parks. So we're just having to kind of figure out how we're going to continue to do this. And again, loan capital and grant funds are going to be really critical for us to continue to even just do the 2 or 3 parks per year.
I just want to say, did you see that slide where Bud and I were sitting there, and I had a look of terror, but also Cheshire Cat? I had just signed, how many? $13 million contract.
No pressure here.
Yeah, we can do this.
Yeah, that was the bridge loan. And then they received the grant and the Oregon Affordable Housing Tax Credit loan to reduce that debt. So I think your current debt is about $6 to $7 million, I think. So at the end, that's where we're at.
And I probably had $200 in my checking account.
Any other questions? Okay. Not seeing any. So I think we're a few minutes early, but I think we can go ahead and wrap up. Yeah. Thank you all so much for being here and for your great questions.